What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the Devy YouTube channel. We're back with another 2024 rookie mock draft. It's never too early to do a mock draft, and just to kind of give your idea of what 2024 class looks like, right? So we're now in week 4 of the fantasy football season. You might be looking at your roster, be like, dang, I am not going to be contending right now. So what does that look like? How can I get some picks? What I have included in this mock draft that we did 3 rounds. I'm going to be breaking down the college players, but maybe more importantly for Dynasty managers, I'm going to be looking at what 2024 first and seconds cost right now with some real live trades that have happened in fantasy leagues. So you can get an idea of what those values look like, right? And we can also talk about tiers. Where are those tiers at? We're going to kind of go over that. So this is a 2024 rookie mock draft video, 3 rounds with Dynasty values and Dynasty picks included. So you know what to do. Hit that like and subscribe button. We'll catch you on the other side. All right, let's dive into it. You know I got to put my boy Trey Franklin on the graphic for this week. But let's get into the picks. So again, these are, mock drafts. This is not my order. If you want my order, you can go to footballguys.com and go check out my big board every week. But this is a mock draft with other analysts and other people within the space and kind of the, fantasy space and what they did. So at the 101, so 12-team Superflex PPR, this is what it would look like. Not tied in premium. We'll talk about that. We got Caleb Williams, right? So this is what the numbers are. This is what his numbers are this year as of right now, week 4. So if you're watching this video later, please don't put in the comments that I got the stats wrong, as someone always does on YouTube. Always love those comments. But this is where he's at right now. Obviously, Caleb's the 101 in a lot of formats. And it's essential as that. Not a ton of analysis needed here. Dude's a stud. Let's just hope he doesn't go to the Bears. Second pick, we got Marvin Harrison Jr. Not a huge year so far this year. I think, he got a little banged up last week. He's kind of been in and out of this. They haven't seen the big pop-offs, but Marvin Harrison Jr. is the 102. There's some blasphemous talk out there from Ohio State fans about how he's not really not that good. Stop it. You guys are the most spoiled fan base in the world. Marvin Harrison Jr. is that 102 in the fantasy formats right now. And to me, there's a tier. It's 101 and 102 tier in terms of like where you're looking at. So depending on where your picks are, depending where you're trying to maneuver, you really want to be in those top 2 picks this year because I think they're special talents. At the 103, we have UNC quarterback Drake May. And I think that, Drake had an okay year so far. 5 touchdowns and 4 interceptions, though, is not amazing, right? 1,100 yards, 38 attempts, 119 yards, 3 touchdowns on the ground. Like, he makes some fun plays. He threw a touchdown yesterday with his left hand. He does that. But I think the interceptions is something to note, right? And we haven't seen a ton of, stats in terms of his production on the touchdown side. Caleb Williams, 15-0, right? He's in that Heisman race area there. Drake May's not even close to the Heisman right now. I put him outside the top 5, probably for my favorites. But he is going to sit here at the 103. At the 104, someone took Brock Bowers in a non-tied in premium. So this just goes to show you, I think, that there is some clear tier break issues here, right? So, running back is all across the board right now. Who's your favorite running back of the 24 class? Wide receiver after Marvin Harrison Jr., there is a tier and there is a question mark of who that could be. So I understand maybe taking Brock. Maybe he's the best player left available on the board. You're going to take Brock at 104. That's who you want. And I think that's the argument here. And that's something to note as we got to get into this. This is what's going to be exciting. Where do we put Brock Bowers at? 105, we got Malik Neighbors. So Malik Neighbors, LSU wide receiver. This is probably the highest I've seen him go, but someone loves him out there. This season, he's absolutely dominated, though. 32 catches, 523 yards, and 5 touchdowns. So we've liked Malik Neighbors. We talked about him heading into the offseason last year. He's definitely stepped up. I think that he's a big play kid. I think he's got that LSU little bloodline going with Chase and Jefferson and what they've been able to do. He had a coming out game 2 weeks ago. He looks really good, right? So, there is a legitimate talent in this wide receiver room, and Malik Neighbors is part of that. At the 106, we have Travion Henderson. So first running back off the board here. He's looked pretty good. He had a pretty good game against Notre Dame this last week. 44 attempts, 295 yards, and 5 touchdowns. I still think you're projecting based on talent and potential here with Travion. And he could be probably the most talented running back of this class. So that's where you're kind of looking at. But don't mind the pick. I think at this value at the 106, you can't beat that. 107, we have Emeka Egbuka. So wide receiver 3 off the board, where he was consistently going wide receiver 2. Again, like Marvin Harrison Jr., hasn't had an amazing year. 19 catches, 263 yards, and 3 touchdowns. Analytically, people love him. They're going to like him. He's a slot receiver. They're kind of think of like that Chris Olave mold. Probably not as athletic, but it can definitely get catches and get targets. Just haven't got him involved in the offense a ton this year. It's been kind of weird, but a Mecca at the 107. Then we have the 108. Raheem Sanders still going at the 108, even though he has not played outside of one game this year. We had 15 attempts for 42 yards. Has not looked great. People are getting nervous about Raheem. I talked to him about it on one of our followers episodes that I do every week. Like, hey, he's got to really step up. That size is concerning. So we really need to see him come back from the injury if he's going to come back. And what does that look like, right? And if with Arkansas kind of just being bad, he might not come back. So what's that testing going to look like? That's the big question there. 109, we got Xavier Worthy. I still love Worthy. Again, what is his weight? Is it 163? Is it 170? What is it listed at? I think you think about what he can do on the football field. He fits right into this new NFL in the slot, making guys miss, creating separation. The biggest question mark with Worthy is his hands. He has some drops, man, and I think that's something to note. And he's got to stop dropping the football. But overall, Xavier Worthy can be that next level athlete at the next level. 110 is Quinn Ewers. So back-to-back Texas boys here. When we're looking at what he's done so far this year, 72 for 112, 64% completion percentage, 1,000 yards passing, 9 touchdowns. He's looked good. Coming up, big game against Oklahoma. What can he do there? If he can lead this team to a playoff appearance or a Big 12 title, probably both, you're looking at a first-round Quinn Ewers. So get him at the 110 and Superflex is pretty good. 111 is Troy Franklin. He's jumping into the first round. I will never forget when I had Troy Franklin at the end of the first 2 years ago. I was just getting heat from it. Now it's looking like it might be a consensus pick. If you can get Troy Franklin at the end of the first round in any rookie drafts next year, I think you'll be excited to see how the season plays out, obviously. But Troy Franklin sitting there at the 111. And at the 112, Roman Dunze. I'm going to be the first one to admit I might have been a little bit too raw in Rome. 27 catches this year, 544 yards, 20 average, and 4 touchdowns. He's looked fantastic in this Washington offense. As we get into the Pac-12, let's see how they do. But Rome right now is a heck of a value. And for someone that was a little down on Rome, I could have been wrong. Now, let's get into the picks. So here's some first trades that we've seen, the 2024 first trades. So we have Richie James and a first for Brandon Ayuk. I've seen a lot of Ayuk deals out there for that first round pick. That's something to note. Puka Nacua is going for 24 first all over the board. We'll see how, what that looks like and if you're willing to give up that. So think of the guys I just showed you. Would you trade them straight up for Puka Nacua in like a Devy or in Dynasty? Right? That's, I think, the question that you have to ask yourselves when you're looking at those 24 first. Because imagine if you trade a first that you think is going to be late and it turns into a top 5 pick. Could you be willing to trade Puka for Brock Bowers, Caleb Williams, Marvin Harrison Jr. in that area? And then we have a 24 first and a second for Kyron Williams. Again, Kyron Williams kind of popped off here. That's kind of where his value is right now. If you have Kyron Williams and he is your running back 5 or 6, right, and you can kind of flip him for some draft picks, but you're not really contending, that's an area to look at. And that's kind of a strategy to use. Now, second round. So when we're going through the second round, we had Trey Benson, Will Shipley, J.J. McCarthy, Braylon Allen, kind of a drop for him there. Keon Coleman, Donovan Edwards, Johnny Wilson, Shedeur Sanders popped in the second round. I'll talk about him in a minute. Blake Corum, Michael Penix Jr., Bucky Irving, and then Devin Neal rounded out. I love those last 2 picks. I mean, Bucky Irving and Devin Neal at the end of the second is hell of a value. I've talked about Devin Neal maybe being that next Tank Bigsby. Bucky Irving has looked good everywhere he's gone. With Devin Achane kind of looking as good as he has, recently, that could be a Bucky Irving type. Hey, okay, if Achane can do this, so could Irving. Shedeur is an interesting one. I would never draft Shedeur in this kind of a format. I do think that Shedeur is not coming back. I mean, he's not going out. I think he's coming back to Colorado. I think him and his dad said you're going to stay here for 2 years. So that, to me, he's not really a 24 asset. I know he's eligible. I just don't see it, right? After the Oregon game, he's got a lot of stuff to work on. For me, I would not waste a pick on Shedeur Sanders in the second round here. I would go after Bucky or Devin, the guys that kind of went after him. Johnny Wilson is the earliest I've seen him go. Donovan Edwards still pushing in that 206 range, even though he's not been very good. Probably the best value outside of the 2 running backs at the end of the second round here. Probably Keon Coleman. With what he's been able to do at Florida State, he could maybe possibly be a first-round pick. I do understand that the question marks around him as like the big play, boom or bust type prospect. So that's something to note as well. Now, as far as second trades in 2024 second, here's the players that you're seeing him kind of go for. Gus Edwards, in a super flex draft, going for Joshua Dobbs and then Tyler Algier. So when we think of like, who are some veterans that maybe people are going after with those seconds, here's an idea. So if you're a contender, would you be willing to give up a late second for Gus Edwards, right? With Bucky Irving and Devin Neal and those guys sitting there, or for Josh Dobbs? Maybe you have Josh Dobbs. You don't really need that quarterback. He's your 4th or 5th. You got him on waivers. Would you give up a second? Would you take a second for him? That's something to think about. And then Tyler Algier, when you think of that, didn't have a greatest game this last week, but would you give up a second for Algier? I wouldn't. I'd keep a second based on just kind of what my perspective of this class can be. But that is something to kind of think about when you're thinking of, hey, if I'm a contender, do I go take a shot on this? Now, third round to wrap it up. A.D. Mitchell at 301, hell of a value. I'm a really big fan of him. Bo Nix, Jatavian Sanders looks absolute stud, tied in 2 of this class. I mean, it wouldn't shock me. Maybe some teams that have him rated higher than Bowers, to be honest with you. Just a really terrible run blocker, though. So that's why Bowers probably gets the edge there. Jalen McMillan is a guy that I think is getting slept on from Washington. Jacob Cowing is also out there. Jace McClellan, Michael Sturdivant, Audrey Estime. Aronda Gadsden's still there. He's out for the year, but people are starting to draft him as such. Antoine Wells, I think, is someone that mention, obviously, with the injuries, kind of had a slow play. Leggett as well out there from South Carolina is someone to watch. He's kind of on the watch board. Riley Leonard is there and Kyle McCord. So that's kind of how we wrap up those. I think Kyle McCord and Leonard are interesting picks in that range. Like for quarterbacks, you just kind of take a shot at them. Right now, obviously, this is without draft capital. So the quarterbacks get a little iffy when we get into it. So that is our 2024 mock. This is what we got going right now in terms of value. So if you play Devy, it's an idea to see where your picks have gone, who's gone up, who's gone down. Guys like Bo Collins completely off the board. Ja'Cory Brooks, a lot of these guys, Jermaine Burton. So some of these players that maybe were getting drafted a couple years ago, they're off the board now. We have some other guys going on there. Other guys to note, Torrey Horton for Colorado State is still out there. He didn't make this draft, but he's something to kind of think about. There's a lot of guys. Go check out my big board for football guys I do every week. You can kind of look at some of the guys I'm thinking about, watch list, all of that. So hope this helped. I hope this helped give you an idea what the dynasty picks are going for and where our 2024 picks are. So appreciate you guys. I'll check you guys next time.